My fingers were slick with October drizzle as I worked the Slim Jim between the window and door frame of the black Mercedes. 3 cars down from the restaurant entrance, partially hidden by a delivery van, timing perfect. Dominic Caruso was inside finishing dinner with his lieutenants. I had maybe 20 minutes before he returned to his vehicle. 20 minutes to plant a bug that would feed my father everything the Caruso family discussed for the next 3 months. The lock clicked. I eased the door open, slid into the driver's seat, and pulled it closed behind me. The interior smelled like expensive leather and cedar, wealth I'd never touch in my legitimate life as a freelance journalist. My legitimate life. The phrase tasted bitter even in my thoughts. There was nothing legitimate about Samantha Wells anymore. Not since I was 19. I pushed the memory away, focusing on the device in my pocket. Smaller than a quarter, magnetic backing, designed to look like part of the car's wiring harness if anyone happened to check. My father's people had given me explicit instructions. Under the dashboard, left side, near the fuse box. Somewhere it would pick up every conversation that happened in this car. The dashboard release was exactly where the schematic showed. I wedged myself into the footwell, contorting my body to reach the compartment, phone flashlight clenched between my teeth. My heart hammered against my ribs, adrenaline making my hands shake. 7 years. 7 years of doing this, of being his pawn, his weapon, his spy. All because of one terrible night when I was drunk and stupid and got behind the wheel. All because a man died and my father made sure I'd never forget it. Except the man hadn't just died. I'd killed him. Vehicular manslaughter that my father had made disappear through his connections, burying the police report, paying off witnesses, ensuring his only daughter wouldn't rot in prison. The debt I owed him was eternal. Paid in missions exactly like this one. My fingers found the panel, pried it loose. The tangle of wires behind looked exactly like the diagram. I reached for the device in my pocket. The driver's door opened behind me. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and cologne and danger. A hand closed around my ankle, yanking me backward out of the footwell. I yelped, dropping my phone, my head cracking against the steering wheel as I was dragged from the car. The world spun. Then I was against the wet Mercedes, someone's forearm across my collarbone, rain streaming down my face. Well? The voice was low, accent subtle but unmistakable. Italian. This is interesting. I focused on the man pinning me. Tall, maybe 6'2", with dark eyes that caught the parking lot lights like polished obsidian. His black hair was slightly disheveled from the rain, and a thin scar traced down the right side of his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him the way expensive things always fit people who could actually afford them. The top buttons of his white shirt undone, revealing a heavy gold chain. Dominic Caruso. I'd seen photos in my father's briefings, but they hadn't captured the intensity of his presence. The way he looked at me like he was cataloging every detail, filing away information for later use. I can explain, I started. Can you? He shifted, and I felt the hard outline of a weapon beneath his jacket. Please. I'm fascinated to hear what explanation justifies you breaking into my car. Wrong car. I thought this was mine. Try again. You used a Slim Jim. That requires intent. His eyes dropped to the device I'd been holding, now on the wet pavement between us. He bent, never taking his attention off me, and picked it up, examined it with professional interest. Surveillance equipment. Albanian make, if I'm not mistaken. Which means, he looked back at me, recognition dawning. You're Richard Wells's daughter, Samantha. My stomach dropped. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence. I've seen your face in surveillance photos. Your father's been very careful to keep you out of the business publicly, but he's used you for exactly this kind of work before. He pocketed the device. What I can't figure out is why you'd be stupid enough to try it on me personally. Maybe your reputation is exaggerated. Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe, or appreciation for audacity. Oh, it's not. Trust me. He stepped back slightly, giving me space but not releasing me entirely. I could run. Should run. But his men were probably positioned throughout the parking lot, and I'd never make it 10 feet. You have 2 choices, Dominic said, his voice dropping lower. Option 1. I call your father right now. Tell him his daughter failed spectacularly at her mission and that I caught her red-handed. You know what happens to people who fail, Richard Wells. I did. I'd seen the consequences. Bodies in rivers, families destroyed, examples made. Option 2? My voice came out steadier than I felt. You work for me now. Feed your father exactly what I tell you to feed him. Pass me everything he shares with you. Become my eyes and ears inside the Albanian organization. He tilted his head, studying my reaction. In exchange, I investigate something for you. A little inconsistency I've noticed in your file. What inconsistency? The accident. The one your father uses to control you. There are some interesting gaps in the police report. Almost like it was constructed rather than recorded. The ground felt unsteady beneath me. You're lying. Maybe. Or maybe your father isn't the benevolent patriarch who saved you from prison. Maybe he's something else entirely. Dominic leaned closer, and I caught his scent properly now. Cedar and rain and something darker, more primal. Either way, you're caught. So what's it going to be, Samantha? Death or working for me? The rain intensified, soaking through my jacket, plastering my hair to my face. I looked at this man, this enemy, and felt something unexpected coil in my stomach. Not just fear, something more complicated, more dangerous. If I agree, how do I know you won't kill me anyway once I'm no longer useful? You don't, but you know with certainty what your father will do if I make that call. He pulled out his phone, held it up. 10 seconds to decide. My mind raced through options, each worse than the last. Running meant death. Refusing meant death. Only one choice offered even a chance at survival. Fine, I'll do it. Dominic smiled, and it transformed his face from intimidating to devastating. Smart girl. Let's go somewhere we can discuss the details. Somewhere dry. He guided me toward a different car. A sleek black sedan with tinted windows. One of his men appeared, opening the back door. I hesitated at the threshold. I'm not going to hurt you, Dominic said quietly. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be bleeding on this pavement. Get in. I climbed into the leather interior, and he slid in beside me. The door closed with an expensive thud, sealing us in warmth and silence. The driver pulled away smoothly, leaving the restaurant parking lot behind. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere safe, somewhere we can talk without your father's people watching. He studied me in the dim light. You're shaking. I'm cold. You're terrified. Understandable, given the circumstances. He shrugged off his jacket, draped it over my shoulders. The gesture was surprisingly gentle. Relax. If we're going to work together, I need you functional, not frozen with fear. The jacket was warm from his body, smelled like him. I pulled it tighter, hating how much comfort it provided. How long have you known who I was? About 6 months. Your father got sloppy on a job in Milwaukee. One of my informants caught you on camera. He stretched his legs out, completely at ease. I've been waiting for him to try something like this. Using you, I mean. You're his secret weapon, the one nobody suspects. Until now. Until now, he agreed, which makes you much more valuable to me than to him. He'll get another spy. I get direct access to his daughter, his confidant. His guilty conscience made flesh. The accuracy of that description stung. You don't know anything about my relationship with my father. I know enough. I know about the accident. I know he's used it to control you for 7 years. I know you hate yourself for what you think you did, and that guilt makes you compliant. His eyes locked on mine. But what if you didn't do it? What if he's been manipulating you with a lie? That's not possible. We'll see. The car pulled up to a luxury apartment building in one of Chicago's better neighborhoods. Dominic led me inside, through a lobby with actual artwork on the walls, into an elevator that required a key card to access the top floors. His apartment was exactly what I'd expected. Spacious, modern, decorated with the kind of understated elegance that screamed money without needing to prove anything. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, lights spreading out like constellations against the darkness. Guest room is down the hall, Dominic said, gesturing. Bathroom attached. You'll stay here tonight while we establish the ground rules. I'm a prisoner. You're a collaborator. There's a difference. He moved to the bar, poured 2 glasses of something amber, offered me one. Unless you'd prefer to call your father, explain where you've been for the last hour. I took the glass. Sipped. Whiskey, smooth and expensive, burning down my throat. What do you want from me? Information. Loyalty. Your father's complete trust, which you'll maintain by feeding him carefully curated intelligence. He settled onto the couch, utterly relaxed. In exchange, I find out the truth about your accident. And if it is fabricated, I give you proof. Irrefutable proof that frees you from his control. And if it's real, if I really did kill someone, then at least you'll know for certain. Guilt is heavier when it's uncertain. He was right. God help me, he was right. I'd spent 7 years wondering if my memories of that night were accurate. If the flashes I recalled through my drunken haze were real, or constructed by trauma and guilt. When do we start? Tomorrow. Tonight you rest. Process what just happened. Decide if you're truly in, or if you're going to try something stupid like running. He met my eyes. Don't run, Samantha. I'd have to send people after you, and that would be unpleasant for everyone involved. I set down my glass. Where's that guest room? He showed me, pointed out fresh towels and toiletries, closed the door behind him with a soft click. I stood in the middle of the elegant space, still wearing his jacket, still smelling cedar and rain, and wondered what the hell I'd just agreed to. Through the window, Chicago glittered with 10,000 lies and secrets. Somewhere out there, my father was probably wondering why I hadn't checked in yet. Tomorrow I'd call him, feed him whatever story Dominic crafted, continue the charade. But tonight, standing in the apartment of my father's greatest enemy, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 7 years. Possibility. Morning arrived with unfamiliar sounds, traffic from a different angle, muffled and distant rather than the harsh street noise outside my studio apartment. I opened my eyes to cream-colored walls and designer furniture, momentarily disoriented before last night crashed back into consciousness. I'd agreed to betray my father, to work for Dominic Caruso, to become a double agent in a war I'd never wanted any part of. Someone had left clothes folded on the chair beside the bed. Jeans in my size, a forest green sweater, undergarments still in packaging. The attention to detail was both impressive and unsettling. How long had Dominic been planning for this possibility? The apartment was quiet when I emerged from the guest room, showered and dressed. Dominic sat at the kitchen island with coffee and a tablet, dressed more casually than last night. Dark jeans, a gray Henley that showed the definition of his shoulders, reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up when I entered. Coffee's fresh. Cream and sugar on the counter if you need it. I poured myself a cup, black, and leaned against the opposite counter. Maintaining distance felt important. We need to discuss the specifics. Direct. I appreciate that. He set down the tablet, removed his glasses. Here's how this works. You call your father this morning. Tell him the mission went sideways. You were nearly caught by building security. Had to abort before planting the device. He'll be angry, but he won't kill you for a failed attempt. Not immediately. And then? Then you continue your normal life. Journalism, coffee with friends, whatever routines you maintain. But when your father gives you assignments, you tell me first. I'll decide what information to let through, what to redirect, how to use you most effectively. The clinical way he described using me should have been offensive. Instead, I found it oddly reassuring. No pretense of friendship or alliance. Just business. What about my investigation? Into the accident? Already started. I have people pulling records, interviewing witnesses from 7 years ago, tracking down the supposed victim's family. He stood, moved to the coffee maker for a refill. Closer now. I caught that cedar scent again. These things take time. Be patient. I've been patient for 7 years. Then a few more weeks won't kill you. His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable. Make the call. Put his mind at ease. Then we'll discuss your cover story. I used my own phone, stepping into the guest room for privacy I knew was illusory. Dominic probably had the whole apartment wired for sound. My father answered on the second ring. Where the hell have you been? You were supposed to check in 8 hours ago. The job went bad. Building security did a random patrol, caught me near the car. I had to run. The lies came easily after 7 years of practice. I've been lying low, making sure nobody followed me home. Silence. Then, did they see your face? I don't think so. It was dark, raining. I kept my hood up. You don't think so isn't good enough, Samantha. If Caruso knows we sent someone, he doesn't. I was careful. Another pause. Come to the house tonight. We need to discuss your next assignment. I can't tonight. I have a deadline for an article. True, actually. My legitimate work as a journalist still needed attention. Tomorrow. Fine. Tomorrow. 6 o'clock. Don't be late. He hung up without goodbye. 7 years, and he'd never once ended a conversation with affection. Just demands and expectations, and the constant reminder of the debt I owed. When I returned to the main room, Dominic was typing on his phone. How'd he take it? Angry, suspicious, normal, good. That reaction means he believes you. He pocketed the phone. I need you to accompany me to 2 meetings this week. Business dinners where having a woman present makes things look more social, less threatening. You'll be introduced as a public relations consultant I'm considering hiring. I know nothing about public relations. You're a journalist. Close enough. Just look professional. Make small talk. Observe everything. He studied me. Can you do that without your father's people noticing? Depends where the meetings are. One is Monday evening downtown. The other is Wednesday, near the waterfront. Both public venues. Nothing that screams organized crime. I considered the implications. Being seen with Dominic would raise questions if the wrong people reported back to my father. But refusing would damage my usefulness to Dominic, which seemed more immediately dangerous. I'll do it, but I need to maintain some legitimate work. Articles due. Editor breathing down my neck about a corruption piece. Perfect. Nothing says innocent like deadline stress. Something almost like amusement crossed his face. You have a younger brother, by the way. Christopher. 30 years old, corporate lawyer. He handles the legitimate side of our business, works to keep everything above board legally. The casual mention felt deliberate, like he was offering pieces of himself to build trust, or testing my interest in his personal life. Why are you telling me this? Because you'll meet him eventually. Better you hear it from me first. He moved toward the door, grabbed keys from a bowl on the entry table. I'll drive you back to your apartment. Try to act like your life is normal. That's how this works. The drive took 20 minutes through Chicago's morning traffic. Neither of us spoke, but the silence felt different than last night's charged tension. More like 2 people figuring out how to exist in an arrangement neither had chosen, but both needed. He pulled up half a block from my building. Call me if your father contacts you with anything time-sensitive. Otherwise, I'll pick you up Monday at 6 for the first meeting. I climbed out, then paused. The investigation. How will I know if you find something? You'll know. I don't keep information that important to myself. His eyes held mine through the open car door. I'm not your father, Samantha. I don't operate through manipulation and guilt. The statement landed with unexpected weight. I nodded, closed the door, watched him drive away before heading inside. My apartment felt smaller after Dominic's luxury space, cramped and cluttered with the debris of a life lived paycheck to paycheck. I'd just settled at my laptop when my phone rang. Kayla, where were you last night? I tried calling 3 times. Guilt twisted in my stomach. Kayla Turner had been my friend since college, the only person outside the criminal world who knew about my father's hold over me. Well, she knew I felt obligated to him. She didn't know about the missions. Research for an article. Lost track of time. At 2 a.m? Try again. I should have known better than to lie to someone who'd known me for 8 years. Can we meet? I'll explain in person. Luna Cafe, 30 minutes. The cafe was crowded with morning rush. Students and professionals grabbing overpriced lattes before work. Kayla sat in the back corner, her editor's eye immediately cataloging my appearance when I slid into the booth across from her. You look exhausted. Rough night. I saw you, Sam. Yesterday evening, getting into a car with a man I didn't recognize. Black sedan, expensive. You want to explain that? My mind raced. How much to tell her? enough to satisfy her concern without revealing the full insanity of my situation. It's for a story, investigative piece about, I grasped for something plausible, about how legitimate businesses in Chicago have ties to organized crime. This guy, he's connected, agreed to give me background information if I keep him anonymous. Kayla's expression said she wasn't buying it completely. And you trust him? I don't trust anyone anymore, but the information could be valuable. Sam, she leaned forward, voice dropping. You're playing with fire. I know you feel like you owe your father everything, but getting mixed up with actual criminals. I'm a journalist. This is what we do. We chase stories other people are too afraid to touch, and sometimes we end up dead for it. The truth of that statement hung between us. She was right to be worried. If she knew the full extent of what I'd gotten into, she'd probably drag me to the police herself. I'll be careful. Promise. She studied me for a long moment, then sighed. At least text me every day so I know you're alive. Deal? Deal. We finished our coffee talking about safer topics. Her struggles with her boss at the newspaper, my upcoming deadline, the new restaurant that had opened downtown. Normal things. Normal conversation. A thin veneer of ordinary life over the chaos beneath. When I got home, there was a message from an unknown number. Just 3 words. Investigation ongoing. Patience. Dominic, reminding me that he was working on his end of our bargain. That somewhere in the archives and records of 7 years ago, the truth about that night might still exist. I spent the rest of the day working on my article about police corruption in the South Side, but my mind kept drifting. To the accident I couldn't quite remember clearly. To my father's convenient rescue, and the debt that had defined my adult life. To Dominic's assertion that it might all be fabricated. What if he was right? What if the guilt I'd carried, the weight that had shaped every decision for 7 years, was based on a lie? The possibility felt both terrifying and liberating. If there was no victim, no death, no crime, then there was no debt, no obligation, no chain binding me to my father's will. But that was a fantasy. Hoping for the investigation to free me was dangerous. Hope had a way of making the truth hurt worse when it finally arrived. Monday came too quickly. Dominic picked me up exactly at 6, driving a different car this time. A dark blue sedan that looked expensive, but not ostentatious. I'd dressed professionally, charcoal slacks and a cream blouse, trying to look like someone who actually worked in public relations. The restaurant was elegant without being flashy, the kind of place where business got conducted over wine and appetizers. Dominic introduced me to 3 men whose names I immediately cataloged for later. They treated me with polite interest, asking surface-level questions about my supposed expertise in reputation management. I played the part, drawing on my journalism background to sound knowledgeable about media strategy and public perception. Dominic watched with what might have been approval, his hand occasionally resting on the back of my chair in a gesture that looked casual, but felt calculated. We were building a story, a narrative these men would repeat to others. The Caruso boss consulting with media experts, legitimizing his operations, thinking about public image. It was smart, made him look forward-thinking rather than criminal. On the drive back, Dominic was quiet for several blocks before speaking. You did well tonight. Natural performer. 7 years of lying to my father taught me how to wear masks. That's not a skill most people develop. You should be proud of it. Pride isn't exactly what I feel. He glanced at me, something shifting in his expression. The investigation is yielding interesting results. Inconsistencies in the police report. Missing documentation. A victim whose background seems manufactured. My breath caught. You're certain? Not yet, but I will be soon. His eyes returned to the road. When I have proof, you'll be the first to know. And then, Samantha, you'll have a choice to make about what comes next. The weight of that promise settled over me as we drove through Chicago's night-lit streets. Somewhere in the city, my father was probably planning my next assignment. Somewhere else, the truth about my past was waiting to be uncovered. And between those two forces, I was walking a line that got thinner every day. 2 weeks into our arrangement, Dominic handed me my first real test. We sat in his apartment office, late afternoon sunlight cutting through the windows, and he laid out the trap, with the precision of a surgeon explaining a procedure. Your father wants information on our shipments through the South Port. Tell him we're moving product Thursday night, a private berth in the Lake Calumet Industrial Corridor, around midnight. Be specific about the cargo containers, the security detail, everything. I stared at the notes he'd written. You want me to send my father's people into an ambush. I want to eliminate a threat while demonstrating your value to him. He'll be impressed you got solid intelligence. What happens when his men arrive is unfortunate but necessary. People will die. People in this business die regardless. At least this way, it serves a purpose. His dark eyes met mine without apology. You need to decide if you're committed to this or if you're going to develop a conscience at the worst possible moment. The accusation stung because it was accurate. I'd spent 7 years being my father's weapon, never questioning the consequences. Now, faced with orchestrating violence myself, I wanted to claim some moral high ground I'd forfeited long ago. I made the call that night, fed my father exactly what Dominic had provided. He sounded pleased, almost proud, which was so rare I felt physically sick when I hung up. Thursday came and went. I tried not to think about what was happening at a private berth in the Lake Calumet Industrial Corridor, while I worked on an article about city council corruption. Friday morning, the news reported 3 bodies found near the waterfront, gang violence suspected, no arrests made. 3 men dead because I'd given my father false information. I threw up twice before noon. My father called that afternoon. We need to talk. Tonight. 6 o'clock. The summons carried weight I couldn't ignore. I texted Dominic, who responded immediately. Go. Act normal. Scared is fine. Guilty is not. I drove to my father's house in the suburbs, a sprawling colonial I'd grown up in and now couldn't stand to visit. He'd bought it with money earned through extortion and trafficking, every brick paid for with someone else's suffering. The housekeeper let me in without warmth. Nobody who worked for Richard Wells wasted energy on pleasantries. He sat in his study, whiskey already poured, expression carved from granite. I'd seen that face my entire life, cold calculation disguised as paternal concern. Sit. I sat in the chair across from his desk, the same one I'd occupied countless times as a child, being lectured about responsibilities and family loyalty. The information you provided was compromised. 3 of my men are dead, 2 are in custody facing murder charges. The entire operation was a setup. His voice never rose, which somehow made it worse. Explain. I don't know what happened. I reported exactly what I saw. Don't lie to me, Samantha. You're not good at it. He leaned forward, ice in his voice. Either you're incompetent, which makes you useless, or you're compromised, which makes you a liability. Which is it? I swear I gave you accurate information. Maybe they changed the schedule. Maybe someone tipped them off. Or maybe my daughter isn't as clever as she thinks. Maybe 7 years of using you has made me overlook how mediocre you actually are at this work. The words landed like physical blows. Not because they hurt my pride, but because they crystallized something I'd been too afraid to see clearly. My father didn't love me, might never have loved me. I was a tool, a resource, valuable only as long as I produced results. I'm sorry, I heard myself say, hating the automatic apology. Sorry doesn't resurrect the dead or free the captured. Sorry is what weak people say when they've failed. He stood, moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. I'm giving you one more chance. Redeem yourself or accept that you're done being useful to me. And you know what happens to people I can't use. The threat wasn't subtle. When I left 20 minutes later, hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, I understood with perfect clarity that my father would kill me if I became more trouble than I was worth. 7 years of service, of obedience, of sacrificing my own life to pay a debt. None of it had earned me any protection. Just temporary value that could evaporate the moment I stopped being useful. I drove to Dominic's apartment without consciously deciding to. He answered the door in dark jeans and a black t-shirt, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. What happened? He doesn't care. About me, about any of it. I'm just a tool he uses until I break. The words tumbled out, ugly and raw. 3 men are dead because of information I provided, and all he cares about is that I failed him. Sit down. I'll get you water. I don't want water. I stopped, not sure what I wanted. How do you do this? Live in this world where human lives are just pieces on a board? Dominic returned with water anyway, pressed the glass into my hands. You think I don't struggle with it? Every order I give, every decision I make, I'm aware of the cost. But I also know that in this life, hesitation kills more people than action ever does. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. He sat beside me, close enough that I caught his scent. Cedar and something darker. My father ran this organization before me. He believed in ruling through fear, through violence so extreme that people wouldn't dare oppose him. I watched him beat men half to death for minor infractions. Saw him torture someone for information about a missing shipment, then kill them anyway once he got what he needed. I turned to look at him. Really look at him. How old were you? 12 when it started. 19 when he died and I took over. Something raw flickered in his eyes. I promised myself I'd be different, more strategic, less brutal. But different doesn't mean soft, and it definitely doesn't mean innocent. I've ordered death, Samantha. I've hurt people. The difference is I own it. I don't pretend it's anything other than what it is. And that makes it okay? No. It makes it honest. He held my gaze. Your father manipulates through guilt and obligation. Makes you think you owe him everything while he gives you nothing. That's worse than what I do, because at least the people who work for me know exactly what they're signing up for. I wanted to argue, to find some moral distinction that made my father less monstrous than Dominic. But the truth sat heavy in my chest. My father had built my entire adult life on a lie, used guilt and debt to control me, never once showing actual love or concern. Dominic, for all his criminal activity, had been more honest with me in 2 weeks than my father had been in 7 years. You think I'm pathetic, I said quietly. I think you're trapped. There's a difference. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear in a gesture so unexpectedly gentle it made my breath catch. But you don't have to stay trapped. That's what the investigation is for. To give you a choice. The air between us felt charged, electric. I should have moved away, maintained professional distance. Instead, I leaned closer. You're just like him, I said. But it came out wrong. Not an accusation, a question. I'm nothing like him. His hand cupped my jaw, thumb brushing my cheekbone. And I'll prove it. How? Instead of answering, he stood, held out his hand. Come with me. He led me to his car, drove for 20 minutes to a part of Chicago I didn't recognize. A community center in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. Windows barred, paint peeling. Inside, it was surprisingly warm. Children's artwork covered the walls, and I could hear laughter from somewhere deeper in the building. A woman in her 50s approached, smiled when she saw Dominic. Mr. Caruso, we weren't expecting you today. Just showing someone the program. Is Maria around? In the back with the after-school group. Dominic guided me through hallways until we reached a large room where maybe 20 kids worked on homework, played games, ate snacks provided by volunteer staff. He explained quietly that this center served families affected by gang violence, offering childcare, tutoring, meals, counseling, all funded anonymously through a network of donations that he personally organized. Families torn apart by what we do, he said. Doesn't fix anything, but it's something. More than your father's ever done for anyone. I watched a small girl color carefully at a table, tongue poking out in concentration, and felt something crack open in my chest. Dominic wasn't pretending to be good. He wasn't claiming moral superiority. He was just trying to balance scales that would never be balanced, acknowledging responsibility while still operating in a world defined by violence. On the drive back, I said, I'm sorry for accusing you of being like him. You weren't entirely wrong. We're all capable of terrible things in the right circumstances. The question is what else we're capable of. He glanced at me. You're capable of more than you think. More than your father ever let you become. Back at his apartment, tension simmered between us. Dominic poured wine, and we stood in his kitchen, separated by 3 feet that felt like miles and inches simultaneously. Thank you, I said, for showing me the center, for being honest. Honesty is easier than you'd think when you've got nothing to hide. Everyone has something to hide. Maybe, But I'd rather you see exactly who I am, flaws included, than build some fantasy that'll shatter later. He moved closer, deliberately invading my space. You want to know the real difference between me and your father? I'm giving you a choice. Right now. Walk away if you want. I won't stop you. Won't punish you. You can disappear. Start over somewhere he can't find you. And I'll make sure he thinks you're dead so he stops looking. Why would you do that? Because nobody should live the way you've been living. Under someone's thumb, paying for a crime you didn't commit with no hope of freedom. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. But if you stay, if you keep working with me, I need you to be certain it's what you want. Not because you're afraid, not because you feel obligated, but because you choose it. The doorbell interrupted whatever I might have said. Dominic's expression shifted instantly from intimate to alert. He checked his phone, relaxed slightly. My brother. He has terrible timing. Christopher Caruso looked nothing like Dominic. Lighter build, wearing a suit that screamed corporate lawyer, with glasses and a much friendlier face. Until he saw me. Then his expression shuddered into professional neutrality. You must be Samantha, the journalist Dominic's been consulting with. He extended a hand, and I shook it, reading skepticism in every line of his body. Interesting timing for a business meeting. Christopher, Dominic's voice carried warning. Be nice. I'm always nice. Also cautious, which is why I'm here unannounced, checking on my brother who's apparently taking advice from the daughter of our biggest rival. His eyes never left me. No offense. Some taken, I replied, but understandable. That earned a flicker of respect. I'll be direct. My brother has a habit of seeing the best in people, which is admirable until it gets him killed. So before this goes any further, I need to know whose side you're actually on. Mine, I said, surprising myself with the truth. I'm on my own side for the first time in 7 years. If that happens to align with your brother's interests, fine. But I'm done being anybody's pawn. Christopher studied me for a long moment, then looked at Dominic. I like her. Still don't trust her, but I like her. He headed for the door, paused. Be careful, both of you. The Albanians aren't going to take those losses lying down, and our own people are getting nervous about all the changes you're making. Recipe for disaster if you're not careful. After he left, Dominic turned to me. He's protective. Can't blame him. Neither can I. I wouldn't trust me either. Lucky for you, I do. He stepped closer, erasing the distance between us. So what's your answer? Stay or go? I should have asked for time to think. Should have maintained some distance, some objectivity. Instead, I closed the gap entirely, rose on my toes, and kissed him. His response was immediate, hands tangling in my hair, backing me against the counter with a hunger that matched my own. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. That's not an answer, he murmured. Yes, it is. I'm staying. On my terms, but I'm staying. Good. He kissed me again, slower this time. Because I wasn't ready to let you go. 1 month. 30 days since Dominic Caruso had caught me breaking into his car, and my life had become something I no longer recognized. Half of those nights I'd spent in his bed, learning the geography of scars across his shoulders, the way he said my name when we were tangled together in the darkness. The other half I spent alone in my apartment, pretending I still had boundaries. The investigation results came on a Tuesday afternoon. Dominic called me to his apartment, and I knew from his voice that he'd found something. When I arrived, he had files spread across his dining table like evidence at a crime scene. Sit down, he said, and there was something in his expression that made my stomach drop. I sat. He handed me a folder, and I opened it with trembling fingers. The police report from 7 years ago looked official, looked real, but as Dominic walked me through it, pointing out inconsistencies I'd never noticed, the foundation of my guilt began to crack. The victim's name was David Morrison, 32 years old, supposedly killed when you ran a red light on Michigan Avenue. Dominic's finger traced the document. Except there's no death certificate, no obituary, no family claiming his body. The address listed for him doesn't exist, never has. I stared at the papers, unable to process what I was seeing. That's not possible. I remember, You remember being drunk and terrified. You remember your father showing you photos of a body, telling you that you'd killed someone, that he'd made it all disappear to save you. Dominic pulled out another file. But look at this. The police officers who supposedly filed this report both retired 4 months after the incident with substantial payments to offshore accounts. The witnesses, actors from a talent agency your father has used before for various operations. The world tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to anchor myself to something solid as 7 years of carefully constructed reality dissolved. He lied. About all of it. Yes. Dominic's hand covered mine. You never killed anyone, Samantha. There was no accident. Just an elaborate manipulation designed to control you from the age of 19. The folder slipped from my fingers. Paper scattered across expensive hardwood, and I didn't care. Couldn't care about anything except the rage building in my chest like a storm. I need to call him. Are you sure that's... Now. I need to call him now. Dominic handed me his phone. Something about using an untraceable line, but I barely heard him over the roaring in my ears. My fingers shook so badly it took 3 tries to dial my father's number. He answered with his usual brusque greeting. What? David Morrison. Tell me about David Morrison. Silence stretched across the line. Then, I don't know what you're talking about. The man I supposedly killed. Except he never existed, did he? You fabricated the entire thing. The accident. The victim. The police report. All of it. My voice cracked. You've been lying to me for 7 years. I did what was necessary to secure your loyalty. You were rebellious. Unreliable. I needed leverage. The casual admission, delivered without apology or remorse, broke something fundamental inside me. I was 19 years old. You were a liability. Now you're an asset. The method doesn't matter. The method was my entire life. 7 years of guilt, of thinking I was a murderer, of doing everything you asked because I thought I owed you. And you'll continue doing what I ask, because despite this revelation, you have nowhere else to go. I made you, Samantha. Everything you are exists because I shaped you. Go to hell. I ended the call, threw the phone across the room hard enough that it shattered against the wall. Then I was on the floor, folding in on myself. 7 years of false guilt and real rage pouring out in a way I couldn't control. Dominic was there, arms around me, not saying anything because there was nothing to say. He just held me while I broke apart, and somehow that made it bearable. Hours later, we lay in his bed, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, real and solid and honest in ways my father had never been. What do I do now? I whispered. Whatever you want. You're free, Samantha. Truly free for the first time since you were 19. Except I wasn't. Not completely. Because I was still tangled in this world, still caught between 2 criminal organizations, still performing a role that required lies and deception. But at least now I was choosing it. That had to count for something. The next 2 weeks blurred together. My relationship with Dominic shifted. Deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. We were lovers, yes, but also partners. He included me in strategy discussions, asked my opinion on territorial disputes, treated me like an equal rather than an asset. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. My journalism work continued. I was finishing a piece about police corruption in the South Side, interviewing sources, following leads. One of those leads brought me to a retired detective who'd worked organized crime for 30 years. He talked freely about old cases, about the Albanian operation run by Richard Wells, about upcoming conflicts between the major families. Word is, Wells is planning something big, he said, settling into his chair with coffee. Some kind of play against the Italians. Public event, lot of witnesses meant to send a message. 3 weeks from now, maybe less. My blood turned cold. What kind of event? Charity gala. The one Caruso hosts every year for that youth center he funds. Wells wants to hit him there, make it clear that even philanthropy won't protect him. I barely remembered driving back to my apartment. Barely remembered calling Dominic, hearing his voicemail, hanging up without leaving a message. The information sat like poison in my stomach. If I told Dominic, I was sentencing my father to whatever retaliation would follow, sealing my position as a traitor, burning that bridge permanently and irrevocably. If I stayed silent, Dominic would walk into an assassination attempt, might die because I was too cowardly to choose. 2 days I carried that knowledge. 2 days of avoiding Dominic's calls, of pretending to be buried in deadline work, of lying awake at night weighing impossible choices. On the 3rd day, Dominic showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to find him standing there, expression carved from stone. "What's wrong?" "I don't know. You tell me." He walked past me, into my small living room, turned to face me with his arms crossed. "You've been distant, avoiding me. Either something happened or you're planning something I'm not going to like. Which is it? I could lie. Should lie. Protect myself. Protect the fragile neutrality I'd managed to maintain. Instead, I heard myself say, 'My father is planning to kill you. 3 weeks from now at your charity gala.' Assassination in public, meant to send a message." The silence that followed felt like falling. Dominic's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Calculation replacing whatever warmth had been there. "How long have you known?" 36 hours. 36 hours. "And you didn't think to mention this?" His voice stayed level, which was somehow worse than anger. "Were you trying to decide whether to warn me or let it happen?" "Of course not. Then why wait? Why the distance, the avoidance?" He stepped closer, and I had to resist the urge to back away. "I need to know, Samantha. Did you tell me because you care if I live or die, or because you're covering your own position?" The accusation landed like a physical blow. "How can you ask me that?" "Because 36 hours ago, you found out your father wants me dead, and your first instinct was to keep it to yourself. That tells me everything I need to know about where your loyalties actually lie. My loyalty is to the truth, to finally being honest about everything after 7 years of lies." Fury rose to match his. "You want to know why I hesitated? Because telling you means destroying whatever relationship I have left with my father. It means committing completely to this, to you, to a life I never chose. That's terrifying, Dominic. I'm allowed to be terrified. Terrified is fine. Waiting 36 hours while I walk around completely exposed is not. I'm telling you now. That should count for something. It does. Just not as much as you think it should." He moved toward the door, stopped with his hand on the knob. "I'll handle your father's plan. You should stay away from the gala. From me. From all of this until you figure out what you actually want." Then he was gone, and I was alone with the wreckage of a fight that felt like an ending. I called Kayla because I had no one else. She arrived 20 minutes later with wine and sympathy, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. "Tell me everything." So I did. The whole story, from the fake accident to the double agent arrangement to falling for Dominic despite knowing better. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said exactly what I needed to hear. "You're in love with him. That's your takeaway? Not that I'm working for the mob, or that my father is a sociopath, or that I'm trapped in an impossible situation. All of those things are true. But the reason you're this destroyed is because you love Dominic Caruso, and you're terrified he won't forgive you." She poured us both more wine. "So what are you going to do about it?" I stared into my glass, seeing my reflection distorted in the dark liquid. What was I going to do? Keep playing both sides until someone got killed? Run away and start over somewhere else? Or finally, definitively, choose? "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think I'm about to find out." 10 days after I told Dominic about the assassination plot, my father discovered I'd betrayed him. I found out the old-fashioned way. 6 armed men showing up outside my apartment building at 2 a.m. I woke to my phone vibrating with Dominic's name on the screen. His voice was clipped, urgent. "Don't leave your apartment. Your father's people are on their way. I'm 5 minutes out." "How do you know?" "One of his men is on my payroll. Has been for 6 months. Get away from the windows and stay down." I crawled to my bathroom, the only room without exterior walls, and crouched in the tub with my phone clutched in shaking hands. Through the apartment walls, I heard boots on stairs, voices speaking Albanian in harsh whispers. They were coming for me, to drag me back to my father, or more likely, to kill me for choosing Dominic over blood loyalty. Gunshots shattered the night. Not inside my building, but close. Street level. Maybe the parking lot. More shots. Rapid fire. The distinctive crack of multiple weapons. I pressed myself deeper into the tub, making myself as small as possible, praying the cast iron would stop stray bullets. My phone buzzed. Text from Dominic. Stay put. Handling it. The shooting stopped as abruptly as it started. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Someone pounded on my door. Samantha, it's me. Open up. Dominic's voice. I stumbled out of the bathroom, unlocked the door with trembling fingers. He stood there in tactical gear I'd never seen him wear. Kevlar vest over dark clothes, a gun still in his hand. Behind him, 2 of his men flanked the hallway. Are you hurt? His free hand cupped my face, eyes scanning for injuries. No. What happened? Your father sent a crew to collect you. We intercepted them before they reached your floor. He holstered his weapon, pulled me against his chest. You can't stay here. Pack what you need. 5 minutes. The police. We'll find 6 Albanian gangsters with weapons and no witnesses. We were never here. He released me, stepped back. Move, Samantha. Now. I grabbed essentials. Laptop, documents, clothes, toiletries, throwing everything into a duffel bag without thought or organization. Dominic stood guard at my door, speaking quietly into his phone, coordinating whatever cleanup operation would erase evidence of his involvement. We left through the back entrance, avoiding the chaos at the front where police were arriving. In his car, reality crashed over me in waves. I can't go back now. To my apartment, my normal life, any of it. No. Dominic agreed, navigating side streets away from my neighborhood. You made your choice tonight. Everyone will know it by morning. 2 of his men died, wounded. They'll live to tell your father exactly who stopped them. He glanced at me. This is real now. No more pretending you're neutral. No more playing both sides. You're with me, publicly, and that makes you a target. The weight of that settled into my bones. I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. My father would consider me dead to him at best, actively hunt me at worst. The Albanian organization would see me as a traitor. Anyone loyal to my father's operation would know I'd chosen his greatest enemy. I'd burned my old life to ash, and there was no going back to sift through the remains. Dominic's apartment became my home. Not temporarily, not as a safe house, but home. My clothes hung in his closet. My toothbrush sat beside his. My laptop occupied space on his dining table. We fell into routines. Morning coffee together, him handling business while I worked on articles. Evenings tangled in each other, trying to forget the danger circling closer every day. Security became omnipresent. 2 guards stationed outside the building at all times, cameras monitoring every entrance, bulletproof glass in the windows. I couldn't leave without escort, couldn't go anywhere without Dominic or his men shadowing my movements. The cage was gilded and comfortable, but still a cage. Christopher showed up on day 3, carrying takeout and wearing an expression that said he had opinions he planned to share whether I wanted them or not. You've got my brother walking around with a target on his back, he said without preamble, setting food containers on the kitchen counter. Albanian hit teams, internal dissent from people who think he's gone soft, and the attention of every law enforcement agency in Chicago. All because of you. Christopher, Dominic warned. No, he's right. I met Christopher's eyes. Everything he said is true, but I'm not leaving, and I'm not pretending this is temporary. So either accept it or tell me now that you want me gone. Christopher studied me for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. I wanted to hate you. Would be so much easier if I could. He started unpacking food. But my brother's been alone for too long, and you make him happy. Happy enough to risk everything, apparently. So I guess I'm stuck with you. It wasn't exactly a warm welcome, but it was acceptance. We ate together, and Christopher told stories about growing up with Dominic, about their father's brutality, and how Dominic had shielded him from the worst of it. Understanding dawned. Christopher wasn't suspicious of me because he doubted Dominic's judgment. He was protective because he'd already watched his brother sacrifice too much for family. My journalism work took an unexpected turn. I started investigating the Albanian organization with the same techniques I'd used on corrupt politicians and dirty cops. Following money trails, interviewing sources, building cases from fragments of information. That's how I found Thomas Kovac. He'd been the chief accountant for my father's operation for 12 years, handling the complex web of shell corporations and offshore accounts that laundered drug money into legitimate businesses. But Thomas had a conscience that had been eating at him, and a daughter who'd overdosed on heroin 2 years ago. Heroin that had come through my father's distribution network. I met him in a diner on the far south side, somewhere neutral and public. He looked older than his 53 years, worn down by guilt and grief. "I can give you everything," he said over coffee that neither of us drank. "Transaction records, wire transfers, names of every official your father has paid off. Enough to put him away for 30 years. But I need protection. Federal protection. I can arrange that. Can you? You're Richard Wells's daughter. How do I know this isn't a trap?" I pulled out my phone, showed him photos of my destroyed apartment, police reports from the shooting. "Does this look like I'm on good terms with my father? He tried to have me kidnapped 4 days ago. I want him gone as badly as you do." Thomas examined the evidence, then nodded. "Set up the meeting. But I want immunity in writing before I hand over a single document." I called Dominic from my car. "I found our leverage. We need to contact the FBI. That's a dangerous move. Everything about this is dangerous. But if we're going to end this without more bodies piling up, we need the law on our side." Silence stretched across the line. "Then, I'll make some calls. We have a contact in the bureau who owes me a favor." 36 hours later, Thomas Kovac sat across from 2 FBI agents in a secure location, backed by lawyers Dominic had provided, and detailed 12 years of financial crimes. The agents left with enough evidence to build a RICO case that would dismantle my father's organization from the inside out. The hit came that night. I'd gone to my old apartment to retrieve more belongings, accompanied by 2 of Dominic's guards. We were loading boxes into the car when the shooting started. Not at us. At my car. 16 bullets tore through the metal and glass, destroying the vehicle but missing all 3 of us because we'd been standing 20 feet away. Message delivered. My father knew about Thomas, knew I'd arranged the FBI meeting, and wanted me to understand that nowhere was safe. Dominic showed up personally to collect me, fury carved into every line of his face. On the drive back, he said, "The charity gala is in 2 weeks. Your father's going to make his move then. Public, violent, designed to humiliate me before he kills me. So we cancel it." "We're not canceling. We're turning it into the trap he thinks he's setting." His hand found mine. "I'm going to use myself as bait, draw out his people, capture them, end this permanently. And if something goes wrong, then you'll be somewhere safe, far away from the blast radius." He pulled up to his building, killed the engine, turned to face me. "I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" I thought about everything that had brought us here. The lies my father had told, the manipulation, the wasted years of guilt. Then I thought about Dominic. Complicated and dangerous, but honest about exactly who he was. A man trying to be better than his father while still operating in a world that rewarded violence. "I trust you," I said, and meant it with everything I had. He kissed me like it might be the last time, desperate and consuming, and I kissed him back with equal intensity. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. 2 weeks. Then this is over. One way or another. 2 weeks until the gala. 2 weeks until my father made his play. 2 weeks to prepare for the confrontation that would define everything that came after. I'd spent 7 years under my father's control, believing I owed him my life. Now I understood the truth. I didn't owe him anything. Not loyalty, not obedience, not even the courtesy of mercy. When this was over, when the FBI had their case and the dust settled, my father would finally face consequences for everything he'd built on lies and blood, and I would be free. The ballroom glittered with Chicago's elite pretending to care about disadvantaged youth while they sipped champagne and networked. I watched it all unfold through a laptop screen from a secure location 3 miles away, cameras positioned throughout the venue feeding me live footage. Dominic had insisted, "You're not coming to the gala. Non-negotiable. We'd fought about it for 2 days before I accepted the reality. My presence would complicate everything. The Albanian shooters knew my face, might hesitate or change tactics if they saw me. Better to be safely removed, monitoring from a distance while Dominic put himself directly in the crosshairs. Christopher sat with me in the safe house, another laptop open beside mine, tracking different camera angles. His usual corporate polish had been replaced with tactical efficiency. Earpiece connected to Dominic's security team, gun resting on the table within easy reach. "He's at the podium," Christopher said unnecessarily. I could see Dominic perfectly, looking devastatingly handsome in a dark suit, addressing the crowd about the community center's impact, talking about second chances and breaking cycles of violence, while armed men positioned throughout the room prepared to prevent his murder. My phone buzzed. Text from Dominic. "See anything suspicious?" I scanned the crowd through multiple camera feeds. The caterers, the security personnel, the guests in evening wear. Everything looked normal, which made my skin crawl. Normal was an illusion. Somewhere in that room or nearby, 3 Albanian shooters were moving into position. "There," Christopher pointed at his screen. "North balcony, man in service uniform, wrong body language for staff." I found the same figure on my feed. He moved with military precision, positioning himself with a clear sightline to the stage. My breath caught. That's one of them. Already flagged. Team 2 is moving. Christopher's fingers flew across his keyboard, sending alerts. 2 more suspicious figures appeared on different cameras within minutes. One posing as a photographer near the main entrance, another blending with guests but standing wrong, weight distributed like someone carrying concealed weapons. Dominic's infiltrated security team moved with choreographed precision. The fake photographer was approached by 2 men in legitimate security uniforms, asked for credentials he couldn't provide. When he reached for his gun, they had him disarmed and restrained before he could clear leather. The balcony shooter lasted slightly longer. He'd actually raised his rifle, begun acquiring his target, when Dominic's people hit him from both sides. The weapon clattered to the floor, and the shooter went down hard under combined weight. The third assassin recognized something had gone wrong. He abandoned his position, tried to blend with panicking guests as security announced an emergency evacuation. But Dominic's people had every exit covered. They took him down in the lobby, professional and efficient. Christopher received communication through his earpiece, relayed it to me. All 3 shooters in custody, no casualties. Stand by for secondary phase. Secondary phase meant the FBI raids happening simultaneously across Chicago. Thomas Kovac's testimony and documentation had given them enough for warrants on 6 different locations connected to my father's operation. As shooters were being arrested at the gala, federal agents were executing those warrants. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered on speaker. "Ms. Wells, this is Special Agent Delaney with the FBI. We have your father in custody. Arrested at Rosario's restaurant 20 minutes ago without incident. He's being transported to federal holding now." The words didn't feel real. 7 years of living under his control. And it ended with a phone call from a stranger. "What happens next? We'll need your full statement. Everything about the fabricated accident, the years of coercion, the intelligence you were forced to gather. Your testimony will be crucial to the prosecution. When? Tomorrow morning, if you're available. Bring your attorney." I hung up, hands trembling. Christopher was already pulling up news feeds on his laptop. Breaking news banners screamed about major organized crime arrests, FBI raids, the Albanian criminal network in Chicago dismantled. Another camera feed caught my attention. Dominic, surrounded by his own security team and legitimate law enforcement, giving a statement to police. He looked tired but unharmed, and relief flooded through me so intensely I nearly sobbed. Christopher's phone rang. He listened, his expression softening. "She's okay. We're both fine. Yeah, we're watching the feeds." "No, she hasn't seen it yet." He glanced at me. "Dom wants to talk to you." He handed me his phone. Dominic's voice filled my ear, rough with adrenaline and emotion. "Are you all right? I should be asking you that. You were the one standing in front of guns. Guns that never had a chance to fire. The plan worked perfectly. Background noise suggested he was moving, probably being escorted out of the building. Your father's in federal custody. It's over, Samantha. Actually over. The weight of those words settled into my bones. Over. 7 years of manipulation, of guilt, of living as someone else's weapon. Finished. I need to see you. Christopher's bringing you to the apartment. I'll meet you there in an hour. We'll celebrate properly. The safe house felt too small suddenly. Walls pressing in. Christopher packed up our equipment efficiently, made calls to coordinate our transport back to Dominic's place. A different car than we'd arrived in, different route, extra security following at a distance. Even with the immediate threat neutralized, caution remained necessary. Dominic beat us back to the apartment by 10 minutes. When I walked through the door, he was there, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, looking more real and solid than anything I'd seen on a screen. I crossed the space between us in 3 steps, and he caught me, arms wrapping tight. You're safe. I breathed against his chest. So are you. That's all that matters. Christopher cleared his throat delicately. I'm going home. You two have earned a quiet night. He squeezed my shoulder as he passed, the gesture surprisingly affectionate. Welcome to the family officially. After he left, Dominic guided me to the couch, poured us both whiskey. We sat close, my head on his shoulder, his arm around me, processing everything that had happened. The FBI called. They want my statement tomorrow. I'll have lawyers there with you. Make sure they understand the coercion, the manufactured guilt, all of it. His fingers traced patterns on my arm. Your father's looking at RICO charges, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder. He won't see freedom again. Good. No ambivalence, no conflicted feelings. Just relief that a man who'd built his power on manipulation and violence would finally face consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Kayla. Just saw the news. Are you okay? Call me when you can. I sent back a quick response promising to call tomorrow, then silenced my phone entirely. Tonight was for processing, for being with Dominic, for understanding that the chapter of my life defined by my father was finally, definitively closed. What happens now? I asked. Now we figure out what normal looks like. Dominic kissed my temple. You finish your articles, testify at the trial, rebuild your life without looking over your shoulder. I work with Christopher to legitimize more of the business, step back from the dangerous operations. We see if we can build something real together. Sounds impossibly optimistic. Maybe, but we've earned some optimism. He shifted to look at me directly. I love you, Samantha. Have from the moment you tried to lie your way out of being caught in my car. Probably should have mentioned it before the night people were trying to kill me. Despite everything, I laughed. Terrible timing, but I love you too. Even when you're being recklessly heroic and using yourself as bait. In my defense, it worked. This time, don't make it a habit. We stayed on that couch for hours, talking through everything that had happened, making plans for tomorrow and next week and next month. The future felt expansive in a way it never had before, not constrained by guilt or obligation or fear. Around midnight, Dominic's phone buzzed with updates. All 3 shooters in custody, cooperating with authorities in exchange for reduced sentences. My father's organization in chaos. Leadership vacuum being filled by infighting. The FBI confident they had enough evidence to secure convictions on multiple charges. And me? For the first time in 7 years. I was just Samantha Wells. Journalist, girlfriend of a complicated man trying to be better. Survivor of manipulation who'd found her way to freedom. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The world Dominic operated in still carried dangers, and my father's trial would dredge up painful history. But it was honest. Real. Built on choices instead of coercion. That night, lying in Dominic's bed with his arms around me, I slept without nightmares for the first time in longer than I could remember. The guilt that had defined my adult life was gone, replaced by something I barely recognized. Peace. Fragile and new, but real, and that was everything. 3 weeks after my father's arrest, I sat in Dr. Sarah Chen's office and tried to explain how it felt to discover your entire adult life had been built on a lie. Liberating, I said, then immediately corrected myself. No, that's not right. Liberating implies joy. This is more like having surgery without anesthesia. Necessary, painful, and I can see everything being cut away. Dr. Chen, Kayla had recommended her after I'd spent 2 days unable to get out of bed, wrote something in her notebook. That's a vivid metaphor. Tell me more about what's being cut away. The guilt. 7 years of believing I'd killed someone, that I owed my father everything. It shaped every choice I made. I picked at the throw pillow on her couch. Now it's gone, and I don't know who I am without it. Who do you want to be? The question shouldn't have been difficult. But sitting there in her comfortable office with its soft lighting and carefully neutral decor, I realized I'd never been allowed to want anything. My father had dictated my path, and even after learning the truth, I'd been so focused on survival that desire felt foreign. I want to be someone who tells the truth, I said finally. About everything. No more secrets, no more manipulation, just honesty, even when it's ugly. That became my anchor. Twice a week therapy sessions where I dismantled years of conditioning, learning to separate guilt from responsibility, fear from caution. Dr. Chen never judged the choices I'd made. Working for my father, becoming Dominic's informant, the moral compromises along the way. She just helped me understand why I'd made them, and how to move forward without repeating the patterns. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out. I'd already given my preliminary statement to the FBI, but the formal testimony would require me to face my father in court, detail the fabricated accident, and 7 years of coercion in front of a jury. My lawyer, provided by Dominic, assured me it would be straightforward. Your testimony establishes motive for the RICO charges, shows a pattern of manipulation and control that extended to using you as an intelligence asset. Combined with the financial crimes and conspiracy charges, we're looking at multiple life sentences. Multiple life sentences. My father would die in federal prison. I should have felt something. Grief, maybe, or satisfaction. Instead, there was just hollow relief. He couldn't hurt me anymore. The Albanian organization collapsed faster than anyone anticipated. With my father in custody, and his senior lieutenants either arrested or fleeing jurisdiction, the power vacuum created chaos. 2 factions emerged, one militant and one pragmatic, and they'd spent 3 weeks trying to kill each other. Dominic worked the situation carefully. Christopher handled the legal negotiations while Dominic met with the moderate faction's representatives in neutral locations, always with security, always with contingency plans. I was at the apartment when he returned from the final negotiation. He looked exhausted, tie loosened, jacket slung over his shoulder. It's done. They accepted the territorial agreement. Northern routes and import operations go to them. We maintain the south side and consolidate our legitimate holdings. He poured himself whiskey, drank it in one swallow. 3 blocks of the city aren't worth more bloodshed. They know it. I know it. Finally, everyone's tired enough to admit it. I crossed to him, wrapped my arms around his waist from behind. That's a good thing. It's a pragmatic thing. Good is relative. But he covered my hands with his, accepting the comfort. Christopher wants you at dinner next week. Family dinner, he specified. With his wife and kids. That's progress. That's him finally accepting you're permanent. Dominic turned in my arms, studied my face. How was therapy? Productive. Painful. Both. I rested my forehead against his chest. Dr. Chen thinks I'm making good progress. Says I'm developing healthier coping mechanisms. Does she know you're sleeping with a criminal? She knows I'm with someone who's complicated but honest with me. That's what matters to her. I looked up at him. And you're working to be less of a criminal. That counts for something. He smiled, the expression softening his usually intense features. Christopher has a timeline. 3 years to legitimize 60% of operations. 5 years to be completely clean. It's aggressive but possible. What happens to the people who don't want to transition? They find other employment. I'm not forcing anyone to change, but I'm not maintaining operations that put unnecessary targets on our backs. He tucked hair behind my ear. I want a life with you, Samantha. A real one. That requires getting out of situations where federal prosecutors might decide I'm worth investigating. My journalism work had become my salvation. I'd started writing immediately after the gala, channeling everything I'd learned into a series of investigative articles about familial coercion and organized crime. How children of criminals were groomed, manipulated, used as assets. I'd changed names, altered details enough to protect sources, but the core truth remained. The series was picked up by a national magazine. Suddenly, editors who'd never responded to my pitches were calling with assignments. A literary agent reached out about expanding the articles into a book. My freelance income tripled. Kayla met me for coffee to celebrate, hugging me so hard I couldn't breathe. I'm so proud of you. This is real journalism, Sam. Important work. It's therapy disguised as investigation. I'm just writing about what I lived through. That's exactly why it matters. Nobody writes about this stuff from the inside. She stirred her latte unnecessarily. How are you doing? Really? Better. The nightmares have decreased. I can think about my father without feeling like I'm going to throw up. Small victories. Those are huge victories. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand. And Dominic? You two are solid. As solid as anything in this situation can be. He's trying, Kayla. Actually trying to build something different. Good. Because you deserve someone who's as committed to changing as you are. Christopher's dinner happened on a Saturday evening at his house in the suburbs. His wife Emma was warm and welcoming. Their 2 daughters, 7 and 9, treated me like a fascinating curiosity. The younger one, Sophie, asked directly if I was going to marry Uncle Dom. Sophie! Emma looked mortified. But Dominic just laughed, ruffled Sophie's hair. That's between your uncle and Samantha. Stop being nosy. After dinner, while Emma got the girls ready for bed, Christopher poured wine for the 3 of us in his study. He raised his glass formally. To family. Blood and chosen. We drank, and I felt something settle into place. This was acceptance. Not just tolerance, but genuine welcome into something I'd never really had. A family that functioned on trust instead of manipulation. I was wrong about you, Christopher said bluntly. Thought you were using my brother. Or that you'd turn on him when things got difficult. But you chose him over everything else you had. That matters. I didn't have much to choose over, I admitted. You had your father's organization, your identity as his daughter. Those aren't nothing, even if they were built on lies. You walked away from all of it. He looked at Dominic. She's good for you. You're different. Lighter somehow. Like you finally believe there's a way out. She made me believe it's possible, Dominic said quietly. That's worth more than anything. The trial preparation consumed my days. Hours with lawyers, reviewing testimony, preparing for cross-examination. They warned me that my father's defense would try to paint me as an unreliable witness, someone with motivation to lie. But the evidence, the fabricated police reports, the fake death certificate, Thomas Kovac's financial records, supported everything I claimed. I asked my lawyer if I'd have to see my father in court. You'll have to look at him when identifying him for the jury, but you don't have to make eye contact beyond that. Focus on the prosecutor, on the jury, anywhere else. The thought of seeing him again made my skin crawl. Dr. Chen helped me prepare, running through visualization exercises, teaching me grounding techniques for when anxiety spiked. He has no power over you anymore, she reminded me. He's in federal custody. He can't hurt you. The worst he can do is look at you, and even that is temporary. My investigative series won a regional journalism award. I stood on a stage in front of industry professionals, accepting recognition for work born from the worst period of my life, and felt profound gratitude that I'd survived to tell the story. Dominic and Kayla sat in the audience, unlikely allies united by their support for me. Afterward, at the reception, Kayla pulled him aside for what looked like a serious conversation. When I asked later what they'd discussed, Dominic just smiled. She wanted to make sure I understood that if I ever hurt you, she knows people. Journalists have surprisingly intimidating networks. She threatened you? Promised me consequences. I respect that. Shows she loves you. 68 days after my father's arrest, Dominic and I lay in bed talking about the future. Not the immediate future of trials and testimony, but the distant one where we might be free of all this. What would you do? I asked. If you could do anything, be anyone, what would you choose? He was quiet for a long time, fingers tracing patterns on my shoulder. Something legitimate. Maybe security consulting. I know how to protect people. how to assess threats. Could use those skills legally. You'd be good at that. What about you? Keep writing. Maybe teach, eventually. Share what I've learned so other people recognize manipulation before it consumes their lives. I shifted to look at him. We could be normal. Boring, even. Boring sounds incredible. He kissed me. Slow and sweet. Let's aim for boring. The preliminary hearings for my father's trial started the following week. I wasn't required to attend, but I watched news coverage obsessively, needing to see him diminished, contained, powerless. The cameras caught him in an orange jumpsuit, shackled, being led into court. He looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Ordinary. That night, I slept without medication for the first time since the arrest. Progress, Dr. Chen called it when I told her. Reclaiming my life, piece by piece, day by day. 3 months from the night Dominic caught me breaking into his car, I was becoming someone new. Someone who told the truth, who chose her own path, who loved a complicated man working to be better. It wasn't the life I'd imagined at 19. It was better, harder, messier, but genuinely mine. 6 months after my father's arrest, I stood in the visitor's room of a federal prison and waited for the man who'd stolen 7 years of my life. The trial had lasted 3 weeks. I'd testified for 6 hours, detailing the fabricated accident, the years of manipulation, the missions he'd forced me to complete. The jury deliberated for 4 days before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. 28 years in federal prison. He'd be 80 when released, if he lived that long. My therapist had suggested this visit, not for his benefit, but for mine. Closure doesn't require forgiveness, Dr. Chen had said. Sometimes it just requires seeing them reduced to what they actually are. Human, powerless, no longer capable of hurting you. Richard Wells shuffled into the room in prison orange, hands cuffed, looking smaller than I remembered. Older. The authority he'd wielded my entire life had been stripped away, leaving behind an ordinary man facing decades behind bars. We sat across from each other, separated by a table that might as well have been a chasm. I have nothing to say to you, he started, voice flat. Good, because I'm not here for conversation. I'm here to tell you that I've moved on, that your control ended the moment you were arrested, and I'm building a life you'll never touch. I kept my hands folded, my voice steady. You destroyed 7 years of my life with a lie, but I'm taking back everything that comes after. You betrayed your own blood, sided with my enemies. You deserve everything that's coming to you. The words should have hurt. A year ago, they might have, but sitting across from him, seeing him powerless and bitter, I felt only pity. I testified truthfully. That's not betrayal. That's justice. I stood. This is the last time we'll speak. I wanted you to know that I'm happy, that I found someone who treats me like an equal instead of a possession, that my career is thriving, that everything you tried to prevent me from becoming, I'm becoming anyway. You think you've won, but you'll always be my daughter. That stain doesn't wash off. You're right. I am your daughter, but I'm also so much more than that. And unlike you, I'm free. I walked out without looking back. The guard escorted him away, and I returned to the parking lot where Dominic waited in the car. He took one look at my face and pulled me into his arms. How do you feel? Like I can finally breathe. The journalism award ceremony had been 3 months ago, but editors still contacted me weekly with assignments. The investigative series about familial coercion in organized crime had resonated with readers in ways I hadn't anticipated. Survivors reached out, sharing their own stories. Academics cited my work in papers about psychological manipulation. A publishing house offered a book deal with an advance that made me cry. I'd signed the contract 2 weeks ago. The book would take a year to write, changing names and details to protect sources while maintaining the emotional truth of what I'd lived through. Kayla had already volunteered to be my first reader, promising brutal honesty about anything that didn't work. You're going to help so many people, she'd said over celebratory drinks. Make all of this suffering mean something. Dominic's transformation had been equally dramatic. Christopher reported that 65% of their operations were now completely legitimate. Real estate holdings, licensed import businesses, consulting firms that actually consulted. The remaining gray areas were being phased out systematically. 3 more years, Dominic had told me during a quiet dinner last month. 3 years and we're completely clean. No more looking over shoulders, no more federal scrutiny, just boring business operations. Boring sounds perfect. Boring sounds like everything I never thought I'd have. The proposal happened on a Tuesday evening in April. We'd been cooking dinner together, something we'd started doing regularly. A small claim to normalcy in lives that had been anything but normal. Dominic was chopping vegetables for a salad while I monitored pasta on the stove, and we were arguing about whether carbonara required cream. It absolutely does not, I insisted. That's an American bastardization. Some bastardizations are improvements. You're impossible. He set down the knife, wiped his hands on a towel, and pulled a small box from his pocket. I'm also serious about wanting to spend the rest of my life arguing with you about pasta recipes. The ring was simple. A single diamond on a platinum band, elegant without being ostentatious. Exactly what I would have chosen if he'd asked. Samantha Wells, will you marry me? I looked at this man who'd caught me breaking into his car, who'd offered me freedom in exchange for information, who'd fallen in love with me somewhere along the way and changed his entire life because of it. There was only one possible answer. Yes, we'd kissed while the pasta water boiled over, laughing and crying simultaneously, and it had been perfect. The wedding happened 6 weeks later. 20 guests in Christopher's backyard, spring flowers blooming, Sophie and her sister serving as flower girls. Kayla stood beside me as maid of honor, wearing a sage green dress she'd picked out herself. Christopher stood with Dominic, genuine affection replacing the suspicion that had defined their early interactions with me. Emma had cried through the entire ceremony. Afterward, at the reception, she'd pulled me aside. I'm so glad Dom found you. He's been alone too long, carrying too much. You make him believe in possibilities. He makes me believe in them too. That night, in the hotel suite Dominic had booked downtown, we'd made love slowly, savoring the knowledge that this was just the beginning. No more hiding, no more fear, just us building something real together. 3 months after the wedding, I sat in the home office of our new apartment. We'd moved somewhere lighter, with better views and less history, working on a chapter about the psychology of manufactured guilt. My deadline was approaching, but the words were flowing easily. Truth always wrote faster than fiction. Dominic appeared in the doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee, prepared exactly how I liked it. He'd learned my preferences through observation, the same careful attention he applied to everything he cared about. How's the writing? Good. I'm on Chapter 7, dissecting how criminal organizations use family bonds as leverage. I accepted the coffee gratefully. Dark stuff, but necessary. He settled into the chair across from my desk, his own mug cradled in both hands. Christopher finished negotiating the sale of our last gray area operation yesterday. As of next month, we're completely legitimate. 2 years ahead of schedule. Turns out a lot of people were ready to change. They just needed someone to give them permission. He smiled, the expression transforming his usually intense features. I'm starting this security consulting firm in January. Already have 3 corporate clients interested. That's incredible. It's terrifying. And hopeful. And about 15 years overdue. He stood, moved behind my chair, hands settling on my shoulders. Come take a break. You've been writing for 4 hours. We migrated to the balcony, Chicago spreading out below us in afternoon light. The city had been the backdrop for so much pain. My father's manipulation. The years of living as someone else's weapon. The violence that had marked the transition from that life to this one. But it was also where I'd found Dominic, where I'd learned to choose myself, where I'd built a career telling truths other people were afraid to speak. What are you thinking about? Dominic asked, arm around my waist. How far we've come. From that parking lot to here. I leaned into him. Sometimes I can't believe this is real. It's real. We made it real. He turned me to face him. I love you, Samantha Caruso. Every complicated, brilliant, stubborn part of you. I love you too, even when you're being recklessly heroic and making terrible carbonara. He laughed, kissed me with the easy affection of someone who knew they had a lifetime to perfect the gesture. When we pulled apart, I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Steady. Real. Mine. The book would be published next year. Dominic's consulting firm would launch in 8 months. We'd build something together. Not perfect, because perfect was an illusion, but honest. A life chosen deliberately instead of one imposed through manipulation and fear. 7 months ago, I'd been caught breaking into a car, terrified and trapped. Now I stood on a balcony with my husband, watching the city settle into evening, and felt nothing but gratitude for every impossible choice that had brought me here. Freedom wasn't a destination. It was a practice, something you claimed and reclaimed every day through honesty and courage, and refusing to let anyone else define your worth. And I was finally, gloriously free. Epilogue. 6 months after the trial, the community center on 18th was louder than it had ever been. New shelves, new paint, same long tables scarred by years of homework and board games. Dominic signed the last grant form and held the door while the late sun spilled across the gym floor. Kayla organized the art supplies with military seriousness and rolled her eyes when Christopher tried to alphabetize the crayons. For once, there was nothing to fix and no one to outrun. The work would never be finished. Good work never is, but it finally felt like theirs.